I've sanded all my fins so that the sanding sealer now is even again. And I've also sanded the area around the joint of the tubes where I put in that modeling putty. And after a spray coat of primer, that should blend in really easily. So my next task is to apply the main fins to the lower body. And these are going to fit alongside the tail cone. And when they're in proper place, will be flush with the aft end of the tail cone. Now, one of the things we need to be particularly careful with here is our glue. We want just a really thin bead of glue on this so that it doesn't squirt out on the sides. There are trim pieces that are going to go on the fins right next to them, and if we have bumps of glue there, they're not going to fit correctly. Also, I'm going to wait on doing fin fillets until I have all of the trim pieces on, so that, again, we don't have the glue getting in the way of the trim. Now, the other thing I'm going to do here is just roughen up a little bit the tube where the fins are going to get glued on. And this just gives the glue a greater surface area to which it can bind. And you don't have to do this really deep. Just a couple of strokes along there. And eventually we'll do it to the launch lug line as well, but that doesn't need done right now. So I'm just going to dust all that off. Alright, and then once again I'm going to check my fit here, and now I'm going to put a bead of glue along my fin. Alright, I'm going to keep this really scarce. That's already too much, so I'm going to have to smear this out a little bit. Okay, so what I want is just a nice even film. I'm going to clean up with my finger here on either side. Set that down for just a moment while I clean the glue off. Okay, and then, like if you've seen any of my other Rocketry videos here, I like to do this two-step process. Alright, where I'm going to attach the fin where it's going to go. Okay, press down and then remove that. Wait 30 to 60 seconds and then place it back on. Now, if you have a fin alignment guide, this is a good time to use it, because we're going to have a whole bunch of fins that we want all of them to be aligned with. And so, especially the kind that slide over the tube and allow for 4 fins to go on pretty much at the same time, that's going to help make this look a lot better. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. Alright, aligning it up, and then sliding it up to make sure that I'm even with the tail cone. Okay, and then I'm just going to go through now and make sure it's aligned vertically. This is a little bit long. Okay, and I'm just going to check it here. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry for at least 10 minutes before I go on to the other fin. Now again, if you're using a fin alignment guide, you can do this a little bit quicker. The main thing though, again, is to keep the glue that comes out the side to a bare minimum. So I'm going to do the other 3 fins off camera, and then we'll come back and do the next set of fins. My aft fins are on, and for the next part, according to the instructions, we need to make a mark along the fin line 14.5 inches from the aft end of the tube, but not the tail cone there. Now, in following the instructions, when I made my fin lines, I only made them up about 1/3 of the way of the tube. Okay, so hopefully you're watching this video before you actually do this, and I would recommend just do all of your fin lines all the way along the length of the tube. It's going to save you some headache here. Fortunately, I do have my tube marking guide, and if I'm careful here, I can extend those tube marks or fin marks here without damaging my fins that have just been installed. Okay, now I did have the one fin line here that I had extended all the way up just as a guideline. So I'm going to go ahead and do now the other 2. Okay, so now I've got all of those lines extended completely up the length of the tube. Okay, so 14.5 inches from the aft end of the body tube. That's going to be right here. And I just need to do that for all of the other ones. So I've got marks at 14.5 inches all the way around. Okay, and that will be where the trailing edge of the middle fins is going to go. And remember, these are weird looking fins, so it's going to go like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to glue these on the same way. Again, trying to keep the glue minimalized initially. We'll come back and reinforce it later. And since these are basswood fins or basswood fins, I think the actual pronunciation is basswood. So just like before, alright, so here's my trailing edge. Stick that on there, apply the glue, and now I'm going to let that get tacky for about 30 to 60 seconds. Okay, now put that back on. And you definitely want this one on good and straight. If this one's canted even a little bit, your rocket's going to go spinning, possibly out of control. Alright, so I can sight this up along the line and with the rear fin. Okay, and I'm just going to hold this here for a little bit and then prop it up with a fin guide to let it dry completely. So once again, I'll finish the other 3 fins off camera and we'll come back and do the forwardmost fins. My middle fins are all glued in place now, and the last set are these very small ones, and these are going to go 3/8 of an inch from the front of the tube here. I might have to extend, let's see here. So I'm just going to extend this line that didn't quite get to the end of the tube. Alright, and then I'm just going to work my way backwards here. So 3/8 of an inch right here. Okay, and we can go ahead and roughen that surface up a little bit. For better adhesion. And remember, our lower fins here have not been filleted yet, so the joints are going to be a little bit weak. So we need to be careful as we're handling this. Okay, and then once again here, I'm going to apply some glue. And again, we want a very thin film here so that we don't get a lot of glue squeezing out along the edges. So I'm just going to take up all that excess there. Okay, and then like the other fins, touch that to the line, let it get tacky for a few seconds. One of the things I found when I was putting on the middle fins was that because of their size and shape, I could not use my usual fin alignment guide, so ended up using the Mark 1 eyeball on that. These ones we should be able to use a fin alignment guide with. Alright, so now I'm just going to put this back on. Okay, make sure everything's straight up and down. Check it from the end. And if we've done all this right, all 3 fins should be lined up. Alright, and once again, I'm going to finish the rest of these off camera, and when we come back, we'll start putting on the trim pieces. Now that the uppermost fins are in place, our next piece is this little fin support plate, and there's a total of 8 of these in the small parts package, and one of these will go on each side of these small fins. So here again, we're just going to use a little bit of glue. These are going to act like fillets. So here I'm going to go ahead, I don't want to use a lot of glue as I don't want glue bubbling up, it's going to look ugly. Okay, so I can just kind of start that there. And then just go ahead and run this down. Okay, if you got stuff on the edges, just scrape it off and run it along the side here. And then I'm just going to pull the whole thing through my fingers. And then this simply runs parallel to the fin. Like this. And then just center it between the 2 ends and get it as close through the fin as you can. Now once this has dried, you might want to consider then putting a thin fillet of glue between the support and the fin. Alright, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. And again, I'm being very sparing here. Again, in part so I don't get blobs of glue on the sides, but also I want this to dry fairly quickly so it doesn't have a chance to shift on me. And if you want, you could give this a very light sanding to remove the laser cut edge there. I think once this is primed and painted, it won't make any difference. And probably have a greater risk of breaking it trying to sand it. Okay, so that's what the first fin looks like there. And again, I'm going to go off camera here and do the other fins, and we'll come back. My support strips are drying now, and the next step will include putting some pieces here right in front of the middle fins. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put in my fillets for these fins, because I'm just kind of worried that they're going to end up getting broken off here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of wood glue here and fill that in. And just smooth it with my finger. And then move to the opposite fin and do the same thing. And then if I need more, I can put it on. Okay, and these are all relatively small, and I'm keeping the rocket horizontal anyway, so we can go ahead and just do all 4 fins at once and just let it dry in a horizontal position. But I will do the rest of these off camera. The fillets on my middle fins have dried overnight, and I'm probably going to go ahead and put another fillet on them as well later on. This is just a weak point in the model here, since you have such a relatively large area joined onto the body tube at a relatively small distance there. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next part. So these are the A pieces. So in the list there, they just call them piece A. There are 4 of them, and these are going to go ahead of the fins like this. Okay, and so we need to measure 1/4 inch ahead. We want to be very careful as we do this so we don't end up breaking any of these fins. Okay, so there's a 1/4 inch one there. Oops, there. Alright, there. And there. Now when we put these on, we want them to bend to conform to the body tube here. And these are quite porous, so you might want to consider taking some fine sandpaper. This is 400 or 500 grit here. And just the surface that's going to be showing up top, just give it a few strokes here. It'll make painting it later easier. Okay, the bottom side, you can keep that rough because it'll help glue it on. Alright, and again, we don't want to use a lot of glue because we don't want globs sticking out of the sides. So just a very small amount. Have some tissue or paper towels handy to wipe things off. So here we're just going to get this nice and thin and even. Okay, and I'm going to just set that down for just a moment. It can get a little bit tacky. Okay, and then I'm just going to eyeball center it here on the line. Okay, and I'm going to squash that down, and I'm going to hold it here for a minute or two, just kind of going back and forth on it like this, to keep it conformed to the body tube. Alright, and then I'll do the same thing for the other three going around the rocket here, but I'm going to do that off camera. The next pieces to go on are these 3 F pieces, and these will go just aft of the middle fins and in between them. So the instructions call for 1/8 of an inch behind the fins, and I'm just going to estimate this by eye here. Okay, so it's going to go about like this. And we're going to put this on the same way that we did for the A pieces. I've lightly sanded one side of these. And again, here we're just going to use a very small amount of glue. And it's important that we get this all the way edge to edge so that we don't have any gaps sticking out. A little more on there. Okay. And here I can use my fin lines to gauge about where I'm at. Okay, and then again we're going to hold this down so that it conforms to the tube. Okay. Oops, a little off there. Alright, so now I'm just kind of pressing down this, going up and down, conforming it to the tube. And again, do this for a minute or two and then go on to the next one, which I'm going to do off camera. Now the one thing we have to watch is there's only 3 of these. Do not put one in the space where the launch lug is going to go. Okay, so the other 3 spaces are good. These are the last small trim pieces. These are piece C, and they are reinforcements for the rear fins. Okay, and so I'm just going to roughly place these to begin with. One is going to go flush with the aft end of the body tube where it meets the tail cone. The next one goes 4.5 inches from the forward edge. So that would place it here. And then a third is going to go 1 1.25 inches from the leading edge. So that's going to go right there. Okay. These are going to go on the same way that the other ones did. We're going to use a thin film of glue to put these in. And so I'm going to take this off for just a minute, and I'm going to mark all the edges. Alright, so we had our 4.5 right there. Make a little mark on the fin. And then 1.25 inches right there. A little mark there. Now I'm going to glue these on like we did before. Oops, that's way too much. So again, I want a thin film here. And then I'm also going to put some on one edge. And this will be the edge that goes against the body tube. So for my first one, this is going to go down here. Again, flush with the edge, the aft edge of the body tube. Alright, and I don't want to press down on the fins too much, so I'm just going to come in here. And once again, just get a nice even film, and this will go right here, and just going to cover my mark there. Okay, again, support this underneath and press that into place. And then a final time here. That one will go at my forward mark. And again, right, I'm just going to hide the mark with the edge there. And press that one into place. And then we'll simply repeat this on both sides of each fin. So we'll have a total of 6 of these reinforcements on each fin. I have all of the fin braces in place. And the last structural elements to put on, other than the parachute, are the launch lugs. Now, one of these is simply going to go at the base of the body tube, and the other one will go 13 inches from the aft end. So we'll just do a quick measurement here along our launch lug line. So right there. And here we'll just apply some wood glue. And since these don't have all the weight of a fin behind them, I really don't need to wait for them to get tacky. Alright, so now I just need to check my alignment here. And then also on the rear one, which looks pretty good already. And then I'm just going to sight down through them. That one needs just a little touch there. Okay. And I will let those dry and then apply fillets to them. As far as the rest of the fins go, probably you'll want to put some fillets in between these pieces here and also between the support pieces and the body tube. Probably not along the fins themselves. I would just leave those the way they are. And we'll be putting some decals over these as well when we get to the finishing touches. I've come back to the nose cone and I'm sanding it with 120 grit sandpaper here, and this will help knock down any ridge along the seam as well as give it some tooth that the primer can adhere to, and this will make the paint stick better. And so I've already done just some light sanding all the way around for the paint, and now I'm concentrating on the seams themselves. Now, I don't want to sand down too far in an effort to fill in any little valleys here. And I don't know if you can see this in the video, but it looks like at the factory they've tried to trim some of the flash off of this, and there's actually a little bit of a gouge right here. And so I'm going to use some modeling putty to fill that in. First I'm going to take some tissues here, and I've got them dampened with rubbing alcohol, and so I'm just going to remove the sanding dust here. Alright, now you can see that's rougher here. If you want, you can use some finer sandpaper to smooth that out. I'm going to be using a plastic bonding primer that goes on kind of thick. And so that should also fill in a lot of the sanding grooves there, and probably will also fill in the area here and around here where there's a bit of valley in the seams yet. Okay, so I'm going to try some of this plastic model putty, and this is actually meant for polystyrene, and I think this nose cone is a combination of polystyrene and polyethylene. So we'll see if this sticks. If it doesn't, I'm just not going to worry about it, and I'll sand around it to fill it in as best I can. Here I'm just going to fill in that region, and then we can also put a line here that follows the seam. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now you want to work fairly quickly with this. If you're not used to using it, I would just do one side at a time and then come back and do the other. Alright, and then I'm going to take a little applicator here and just smooth that in, just like that. It doesn't need to be anything fancy at this point. We just want to smooth it into the valleys there. And then up here, I'm going to try and give it a little bit of shape, but mostly just smoothing it around as well. And so this stuff starts to dry really quickly, and you can usually sand it about after an hour or so. Okay, so I'm going to let that go, and we'll come back and sand this and see how it came out. After the model putty has dried, I went ahead and resanded this with 150 grit sandpaper. And you can see here that the putty's actually done its job. After sanding, it's just remaining in where the low places were there. It didn't do a perfect job. There's still a little bit of a low spot there that did not adhere the putty. But for the most part, this is looking a lot better than original, where it had especially this little cutout gouge here. So I'm going to set that aside. And back on the main part of the rocket itself here, all of the detail pieces now have thoroughly dried, and I need to put fillets in along the base of the main fins here, and very small ones in here along the trim pieces. I don't want to fill in that too much and cause it to be less prominent as what is supposed to be a metal reinforcement on the actual rocket. And because I want relatively thin fillets this time, I'm going to use white glue rather than the usual wood glue. But otherwise I'm going to do this in more or less the same way, but I'm going to do it in sections. So here I'm just going to put in a little bead of white glue here. Now you can see there's little bubbles forming in there, and that's one of the disadvantages of white glue. It tends to do that a bit more often. Okay, and now again I'm going to use my finger to smooth this in. And it's a good idea. Here I'm going to use a Q-tip, cotton type applicator here, to get into the nooks and crannies. Okay, now again, here it's going to be a little bit difficult. I'm going to leave that little glue fillet in right there, but I'm not going to do the top. I want to keep that edge there to make it look more realistic. And I'm trying to balance here aerodynamics and scale reality here. So I'm gonna, again, trying to get a small fillet in there. And then finally on this last piece, and I'm not going to fillet the back edge there because everything kind of drops away from the tail cone. So I'm just going to leave that there so we don't end up with glue down in the tail cone. Okay, and I'm going to repeat this off camera for each side of the fin all the way around. Now, because the white glue does not dry as quickly, you need to be especially careful that you allow these fillets to dry. So I'm going to do this one, and then I'm going to do the facing one here. Let those dry, turn the rocket a quarter turn, do the next two facing ones, etc. as we go all the way around. What I don't want to get into a position of that I've got multiple fillets that are still wet, and as I'm working on one set, the other set may start to drip or run, and I don't want that. So be a little patient here. This entire kit is all about patience. So I'm going to go off camera here and finish those fillets, and then we'll come back. I have finished all of my fillets, and so the pieces down the main part of the fin, the launch lugs here, okay, and then little trim pieces, all of those have been glued and filleted as needed. So I'm going to take this off camera again to do the painting with primer and then with a finish coat, and I will come back after all that's done. There are lots of good painting videos out there, and it's really not very easy for me to videotape painting this, but I will be back to show you how to put the decals on. At this point I have the base white coat of paint on the rocket, and for the sake of expediency here, I'm not going to worry about the trim paint at this point, but instead show you how to apply the decals. These are all water slide decals, and they're actually groups of decals here. And so, for example, the C's, all in here, we'll actually cut these 2 spots each, and they will go on to the little rectangles here that reinforce the fins. The A's here are meant to be used as one piece, but the frame is not part of it. So we'll cut these out just inside the lines, and these are going to go up on these pieces on the upper part of the body tube. Okay. Then we have here the C's. We did the C's. Now we've got the B's. Okay, and the B's here are going to go over these little pieces here. Okay, so it'll be this section here, each one of these little pieces. And what we'll need to do with these guys is, in this case, the entire piece is the decal, including the frame, and we'll cut a hole in the middle here so that it fits over the balsa piece there. Okay, the D's here are in long strips, and we'll separate these out. These are going to be wrapped around the body tube, one of them approximately here and one approximately here. And then the third one we'll cut into pieces that are going to fit in between the forward or the middle fins here. And then finally we have the 2 bits of writing here in Russian. So the part F here, this is going to go here at the launch lug at 90 degrees off, so they're going to go in this region. And you can check the image on the box to make sure of the placement. And then these other, the longer Russian pieces here, these are going to go at opposite sides right on the edge of the body tube where it meets the nose cone. So I'm not going to do all of these on video, but I'll show you an example of each one of them here. So the first decal is going to be the A decal here, and I've trimmed this so that it will fit right on one of these trim pieces here. In fact, it should just fold over the edge if everything works perfectly. The 3 rivet part here should be facing aft. And so now I'm just going to place this into some warm water. and let the water saturate the paper. So about the time it sinks there, it means it's going to be close to ready to go. So I'll go ahead and put it all the way down. And we want this to be able to slide easily off. So that's not quite there yet. I'm going to put that back in. Give it a few seconds. And again, see if I can slide it. Alright, it's just starting to go. I'm going to give it just a little more water there. Okay, and now if I slide this, there I've got a little bit of the edge coming off. And so now I'm going to apply that down here and carefully slide the paper out from underneath it. Okay, and now I'm just going to hold a little bit of tension on that as I move it into position. Okay, and I've got a little bit of the decal coming over the edges there. And that may tack itself down, or it may not. If it doesn't, we'll just take a hobby knife and trim all the way around that gently after the decal is dried. Right now, you don't want to do that. Okay, and we'll do that 3 more times all the way around the rocket. Next we have the B decal, and this is the one that we keep the frame in. And I've cut out the middle of it so that it will fit right over this piece here. Okay, and it's just barely there. I want to leave enough that I can still manipulate it. And then again, we can trim anything that is still sticking up. So once more, I'm going to place this in some water and let it saturate. Now this one's going to be tricky simply because of that cutout. So you want to be extra gentle with this one. Alright, and then once more here, I'm going to check if it's ready to slide. It is not quite yet. Okay, there we go. So just like I did before, I'm going to bring a little bit of an edge there. And now I just need to be careful that I don't rip it. So I'll pull that off and then gently position that over. Just like that. And here I'm going to use a tissue to blot that down around the edges so I don't have any bubbles there. Okay, so it should look like that when we're done. And again, repeat this for the other 2. There's not a 4th one in this because of the launch lug there. Next we have one of the C decals, and these are meant to be cut apart in pairs of rivets, and these are going to be placed on the little fin supports there. So these should go fairly easily. There's just a lot of them. So once more we'll go ahead and put that in the water and let it get saturated. And then here, once more, let's give it a little slide here, make sure it's ready. Not quite. Okay. So again, I've taken the edge and slipped that over. And now I'll just apply this, hold on to the decal, and slide the paper off of it. Now because of these are so small, they're going to have a tendency to move like that. So what you want to do is get this centered fairly quickly before it dries out. This one just does not want to cooperate very well. There we go. Okay, and you'll have a whole bunch of these to do. There's 6 of them per fin. And again, if you're going with the illustrations on the package, the fins are usually painted blue or gray, and you'll want to do that before you put the decals on there. Next I have one of the D decals, and these are meant to go around the body tube. And from the instructions, one of these is going to go 9 inches from the aft end. And so I'm just going to very quickly here make a light mark with a pencil. And I will put the decal right over that mark so we won't see it anymore. Okay, and again, the main thing to be careful with this is that it is very long, so it's going to be easier to break. If you do break one like this, you can simply put it back together using the 2 halves, and it's simply a matter of lining things up, which is a little bit easier said than done, but is among the realm of possibilities there. But even the act of checking this, so instead of trying to push it over the edge, I'm pulling it inward, because that way it'll just buckle a little bit without tearing. Okay, give it a little bit more there. Okay, that's moving pretty freely now, but not necessarily all the way around. So that's what we got to be careful that we don't rip it. Alright, and I'm going to place this on. And gently, very gently, it's got a lot of friction in here. Pulling that off. And I'm going to cover my mark there. Okay, and I'm going to continue pulling this around. Here it can be a little tricky to keep it straight as we're going along. Oh, but we came pretty close there. Alright. Just going to do that. And, whoop, come back. Okay, I'm going to just gently pull on both ends so they overlap a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to go around. That looks pretty even. So here, once again, I'm just going to dab off that water so it doesn't keep sliding. There we go. And okay, so the second one of the D decals then is going to go 11 3/4 inches from the aft end, which is going to place it about here. And then for the third one, we're going to cut it into 2 dot sections there. So you'll be able to take this and basically just cut them in half here and here. And use that as a general guide, and that's going to go right between these. And then you just do that for every 2 rivets. You'll cut it halfway in between the end and the next one. Alright, next we're going to do the shorter of the 2 Russian words or phrases here. And this is going to go 1/2 inch below this panel here. And 90 degrees from the launch lug. So the 2 sides of the launch lug. The back side here opposite the launch lug will not get one. Okay, so we're just going to put that in there. Whoa, that one came off really quick. Okay, so I'm just going to turn this. And I'm just going to eyeball it here. Okay, and that actually came out really well. And then the other one essentially will go on the opposite side of the rocket. So the final decal is the other little bit of Russian here, and this is going to go right at the edge of the forward end, and I'm just going to put it here. And then the other one of those will go on the opposite side. And then I'm just going to get that to equal out. Oop, come back. There we go. Okay, and that's the last decal I'm going to do on camera here. I will finish the rest of this up off camera. And with that, this is the end of our video. Now, regardless of how long the video is, this actually took a lot of time. So this is a very challenging rocket, simply in terms of the level of detail and the very many little parts and decals that have to go onto it. But it can be rewarding if you get it all done, and I'm almost kind of afraid to fly it simply because of those middle wings there. But hopefully they've stayed on well enough and it'll survive its first flight. Otherwise, I'm almost tempted just to leave this as a display model. So with that, I hope you have a good, safe launch and a safe recovery, and you'll see me on the next video.